The early morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Charles de Gaulle Airport, casting soft light on the polished floors. Travelers moved with weary purpose, sipping coffee, scrolling phones, wheeling suitcases. In the middle of it all, a man stood motionless. No entourage, no briefcase, no expensive shoes, just a quiet, tall black man, in a simple hoodie, standing near Gate 37. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes missed nothing. His name was Ibrahim Traoré. To the world, he was the President of Burkina Faso. But here, right now, he was just another passenger flying home. He greeted the cleaning staff in soft French. Bonjour, ça va? They smiled, unaware they'd just exchanged words with the head of state. And that's exactly how Traoré liked it. No press, no photographers, no guards. He traveled alone by choice. He boarded the plane early, business class, seat 2A, window seat. He nodded politely to the flight crew and took his seat in silence. He was calm, grounded, invisible by design. But a storm was boarding behind him. A few rows back, whispers started. A middle-aged Frenchman in a sharply tailored suit stood at the boarding gate, frustration brewing in his voice. "This is unacceptable," he barked. "I'm a strategic partner in over 7 projects in Africa. I require business class." The gate agents were apologetic. "Sir, all business seats are taken." He didn't accept that. Men like him didn't get told no. He paced. He snapped at his assistant. He threatened to call the airline CEO. Still, no seat. The crew called for backup. That's when Claire arrived, tall, blonde, crisp Air France uniform, eyes like scanners. She entered the cabin swiftly, scanning seat numbers. She stopped at 2A. Her eyes narrowed slightly. A black man. No designer accessories, no badge, no staff, just a hoodie and stillness. She leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "Probably an error." She approached Traoré with a forced smile. "Bonjour, monsieur. May I see your boarding pass?" He handed it over without protest. She looked. 2A. Correct. Her expression didn't change. "Sir," she said, keeping her voice polite but pointed, "we may need to relocate you. Another passenger has urgent needs. We'll offer compensation." Traoré raised his eyes slowly. "And why me?" "No reason, just a small adjustment." "A guest more important than me?" Her smile tightened. "It's for operational reasons." Traoré didn't flinch. "Then explain the operation." Other passengers were listening now. Newspapers lowered, keyboards paused, eyes turned. He leaned back gently. "No, thank you. I will remain in my seat." Claire's face twitched. She wasn't used to resistance, especially from someone like him. She turned and walked down the aisle, pausing at another black man in 4C. "Sir, may I ask you to move to economy?" Confused, he asked, "Why me?" She offered no explanation. Traoré stood up. His voice was firm, not loud. "You're making decisions based on color, not boarding passes. That's discrimination." Passengers shifted. Some looked down, some looked angry. Claire froze. "Sir, please sit. Don't cause a scene." Traoré held her gaze. "I'm not causing anything. I'm witnessing it." And with that, he sat down again, calm, measured, unmoved. But the wheels of justice, hidden behind silence, had already begun to turn. The tension lingered in the cabin like smoke. Even as Claire walked away, pretending nothing had happened, the air around seat 2A had changed. No longer just a seat, it was now a silent protest. Passengers shifted in their chairs, sensing something unspoken. A few glanced at Traoré, others looked away. He remained still, calm, composed. Not victorious, simply undisturbed. But the flight wasn't full yet, and the storm hadn't even boarded. From the gate, the CEO appeared, tall, silver-haired, and puffed with self-importance. His Italian suit caught the light like armor. He carried nothing himself. 2 assistants trailed behind him, carrying bags, holding papers, nodding on cue. He entered the plane with a sigh loud enough for the front row to hear. "Good morning," Claire said, smiling more genuinely this time. "We've arranged something." He nodded, not even acknowledging her presence. His eyes scanned the cabin for an empty throne. Claire leaned in, whispering like a co-conspirator. "Seat 2A was occupied, but we're trying alternatives. It's complicated." The CEO didn't answer. He only stared, until his eyes landed on Traoré, the man who'd refused to move, the man in the hoodie. He raised an eyebrow. "That seat?" he said flatly. "Is that the issue?" Claire nodded subtly. The CEO scoffed. "Handle it." She nodded and turned, but something stopped her. A woman seated just across the aisle, African, mid-40s, nurse uniform folded on her lap, was watching closely. Claire's eyes met hers for a second. The woman didn't look away. She knew. Claire walked past her and tried again, this time with more authority. Sir, I must ask once again that you relocate. It's for the comfort of a partner with urgent business needs. Traore turned his face toward the window. No. Sir, I'm warning you. That's twice now you've asked the wrong person to move, the nurse said softly, interrupting. Claire blinked. I'm sorry, she asked. The woman leaned forward. You've skipped every white man in this cabin, including the empty seat in 3D. That's not operational. That's habitual. Passenger stirred. A man coughed awkwardly. The CEO frowned. Who are you to interfere? The nurse smiled. A citizen, same as him, same as you, just not as loud. Claire stood frozen for a second. Then, like every system under pressure, she folded into routine. Captain, I need assistance, she whispered into the phone at the galley. Meanwhile, the CEO sat, row 3B, just behind Traore. Close enough to speak, far enough to sneer. You're making quite the fuss, aren't you? He muttered. Traore didn't reply. I have influence in your country, you know. Projects, gold, infrastructure. Things that keep your people employed. Still silence. The CEO leaned in just slightly. You should learn gratitude. Traore turned his head slowly. His eyes met the CEO's. There's no gratitude in servitude. The CEO blinked. He leaned back. No more words. The aircraft engines roared to life. The safety demonstration began. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead bins locked. But the cabin wasn't ready. Not emotionally. As the plane taxied down the runway, a quiet dread pulsed beneath the metal walls. The woman across the aisle whispered again, to her neighbor this time. You know who that is, don't you? No. She nodded toward 2A. That's our president. The neighbor's eyes widened. Are you sure? She nodded. He's always like this. He doesn't need noise to lead. The plane lifted into the sky. But the truth? The real turbulence was still ahead. Cruising at 30,000 feet, the cabin had grown eerily quiet. Dinner trays had come and gone. The lights were dimmed. Most passengers had reclined into silence, lulled by the hum of the engines. But not everyone slept. Traore sat still, staring out the window at the stars, silent, unmoved, alert. Behind him, the CEO was sipping his third glass of champagne, chuckling softly at his own jokes. Claire hovered nearby, nodding on cue, laughing just enough to keep his attention. She no longer glanced at seat 2A. She didn't want to. As the captain's voice crackled over the speaker, announcing the descent into Ouagadougou, a few passengers stirred. Traore adjusted his seatbelt. The nurse across the aisle sat upright. But out the window, just beyond the sleepy clouds, something was happening. One passenger squinted. Are those military vehicles? Another gasped. Soldiers, lined up. Someone else added, I see SUVs, and a convoy. Are we landing in a war zone? The CEO smirked. Relax, people. That's for me. I have meetings here. Big deals, energy, infrastructure. Claire nodded eagerly. They probably sent a delegation. He grinned. As they should. But the nurse just shook her head. Arms crossed, a quiet smile curving her lips. The plane touched down with a gentle thud. As the wheels rolled across the tarmac, heads turned toward the windows. Outside, the view was surreal. Rows of black SUVs lined up in perfect formation. Soldiers in full dress stood shoulder to shoulder, unmoving, hands at their sides. Behind them, high-ranking officials in suits waited under the beating sun. It was not a welcome. It was a ceremony. Claire peeked out the window and her breath hitched. What is this? The CEO adjusted his tie. Standard protocol, he muttered. They know who's arriving. Passengers began murmuring. This isn't normal. Who's on this flight? And then, boots. The sound of leather against metal echoed through the cabin. The boarding door opened. A single officer stepped in, tall, stone-faced, wearing a black beret. His boots clicked against the aisle floor like a metronome of authority. He didn't speak, he didn't look around. He walked, row by row, until he reached seat 2A. Claire stood frozen near the galley. The CEO sat up straighter. The officer paused, lifted his hand, and in perfect form saluted. Mr. President, he said loud and clear, welcome home. The cabin fell silent. The entire plane exhaled as one. Claire's mouth fell open. Her hands trembled. The CEO blinked, eyes darting between the officer and Traore. President, he whispered, that man? The passengers, once silent, now stared. Every eye turned to the man in the hoodie, the man they thought was no one. Traore rose slowly. He didn't speak, he didn't smile. He simply nodded. The officer turned his gaze toward the aisle, speaking firmly. We have orders. 2 passengers are to disembark immediately. They will be escorted for questioning. He didn't look at Traore. He looked at Claire. Then, the CEO. Claire stammered, Me? Wait, I didn't know. The officer's tone never shifted. That is irrelevant. We were just following protocol, the CEO added quickly. Surely this is... No, this is justice. 2 guards stepped inside. The aisle cleared. The moment had arrived. The plane had landed, but the truth? 2 people had just crashed. The heat hit hard as the cabin doors opened. A wave of dry golden sunlight swept through the plane. Ibrahim Traoré stepped into it. He moved like silence given shape, steady, unbothered, dignified. On the tarmac, elite guards stood tall. Ministers flanked either side of a red carpet. A few steps beyond, behind the barrier, a small crowd had gathered. Phones raised, eyes wide. They weren't cheering yet. They were stunned. Because the man they thought was invisible was suddenly the most visible figure on earth. Behind him, Claire and the CEO were led down the steps by officers. No resistance now, no raised voices, no last-minute excuses. Only the rhythm of handcuffs clicking shut and heels scraping concrete. Someone in the crowd gasped. A child tugged at their mother's sleeve. Is that the president? Yes, she whispered. Claire looked around, her face pale, lips trembling. She tried to speak, but nothing came. The CEO stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, arrogance melting into confusion. Cameras clicked. A reporter shouted, Mr. President, do you have a statement? Traoré turned slowly. He spoke not with fury, but with fire. In Burkina Faso, he said, we do not measure a man by the shade of his skin or the cost of his suit. We measure him by his dignity, by his humanity, by his respect for others. He paused. And today, we reclaim that respect. The crowd erupted, not just in cheers, but in validation. They weren't just witnessing a moment. They were part of a shift. From Paris to Pretoria, from Accra to Dakar, phones lit up. Hashtags surged. Stand with Burkina, Anshan, respect Africa, Ka, the man, into, A. The footage, the salute, the silence, the slow walk, went viral before the hour was out. Air France issued a rushed press release. We deeply regret the unfortunate misunderstanding. It was too late. African youth flooded TikTok and Twitter with reaction videos. One girl from Nairobi said, This isn't just about a flight. This is about all of us. In Mali, a student council declared a Traoré Day. In Senegal, young artists painted murals of a man in a hoodie, sitting calmly on a plane, with a crown drawn in silhouette behind his head. The CEO's name was leaked. His business partners issued panic denials. Claire's photo was on every screen, but in a prison cell near Ouagadougou, she was silent, facing charges of public discrimination, abuse of position, and disrespect toward a head of state. Diplomatic calls flooded in from Paris, apologies, excuses, explanations. But the response from Burkina Faso was short. This is a sovereign nation. We will apply our laws equally. Meanwhile, Traoré returned to his office. He didn't throw a press conference. He didn't gloat. He simply resumed his work, building roads, improving healthcare, organizing education initiatives. But around the world, something had changed. Because that day, a man who boarded quietly in Paris had landed loudly in the hearts of millions. And the world? It was finally listening. In the days that followed, the story didn't fade. It burned. News outlets around the world replayed the same moment. A uniformed officer saluting a man in a hoodie. Social media turned that still frame into legend. Art, music, poetry, everything revolved around one name, Ibrahim Traoré. But Traoré himself? He remained silent. He didn't tweet. He didn't correct. He didn't defend. He let the world speak instead. In Ouagadougou's high court, the trial of Claire and the CEO began under the eyes of the nation. Claire sat hunched, trembling slightly, her hands clenched in her lap. The CEO sat beside her, stone-faced but paler than usual. Their lawyers spoke in circles, procedure, confusion, misunderstanding. But the evidence was everywhere, recorded videos, audio, testimonies from passengers, even crew. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steady eyes, leaned forward. You say you didn't know who he was, she said to Claire. That may be true, but the question is, did you care who he was as a person? Claire had no answer. Verdicts came swiftly. Public insult toward a head of state, discriminatory treatment in a state-bound aircraft, abuse of professional authority. Sentencing would follow, but for now they were remanded into custody. The French embassy protested. Letters were sent. Apologies stacked like paper shields. Traoré didn't respond. Instead, he visited a rural school construction site in the northern provinces. He smiled at children carrying bricks, bent down to speak with local teachers, reviewed supply reports. Cameras were present, but he didn't perform, he simply worked. In the capital, university lectures referenced the man in 2A as a modern myth, part political science, part moral lesson. In Accra, a radio host said, "He reminded us that you don't need noise to create thunder." In Kinshasa, a poet wrote, "He never raised his voice, yet the skies bent to hear him." And in Nairobi, a boy asked his father, "Can a president really travel like that?" His father nodded, "Only the real ones." Weeks later, Traore sat quietly in his office, reviewing infrastructure proposals. His advisors argued over logistics, maps, policies. But Traore's gaze rested on the window. Outside, the city pulsed with new rhythm. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a boarding pass, creased, faded, seat 2A. He folded it slowly and placed it in a folder labeled Public Memory. He didn't need monuments, he didn't need revenge. He had something rarer, dignity. And the legend? It would live not because it was shouted from podiums, but because one man once whispered no, and the whole world finally heard.